Greetings, folks. Iolair here, and welcome to my review of the new premium Tier 9 German battleship, the Pommern. I'll have some gameplay from the first two matches I played with her, and then I'll go to port and do an in-depth review of her ship specifications and my build, including commander skills and ship upgrades, and I'll also have some final thoughts. I'll also place an index in the video description below, so if you want to skip to a particular section, feel free to do that. Now, this particular battle was the first match I had with her. This was a Tier 10 Epicenter match on Northern Waters. I'm in division with Angry Ace, who is our Soul Destroyer in the Z46. And I am running a secondary survivability build. This is the commander for my Bismarck. And again, I'll go into detail on my build in the second part of the video when I go to port. So what can we say about the Pommern? She is a Friedrich der Große with 12 Bismarck guns. And she plays very similarly in terms of her tanking and her armor capabilities as the Friedrich, but I think most players will find her gun systems to be a little more comfortable as I send out my first salvo in the ship against an opponent, and I land a double citadel. So 6 out of 12 shells on, and then the Vladivostok that's on my port side finishes off the poor Ibuki. Of course, that is a rather squishy ship, so that was a pretty nice initial hit. So yeah, she's a Friedrich with the Bismarck guns. She has torpedoes. So she has the Tirpitz torpedoes. These are the same torpedoes on the Odin, Eger, and Siegfried. And she does not get a spotter based on what you can see with the consumables. So she has a very similar playstyle to the Friedrich, although I think most people will find her gun systems to be a little more comfortable because she does have more rifles, and it will be easier to land more shell hits. I know a common frustration I think of many players with the Friedrich is that the tech tree battleship has only 8 rifles, and getting consistent damage historically has been quite challenging with that ship. Now, the 380 millimeter guns means that she is not going to be able to compete as well against highly armored targets like this Kurfürst that's in front of me. And so you may find when you play her that you may need to fire HE more frequently than you might otherwise expect, as my secondary set their first fire on the Kurfürst. With the full secondary build, or nearly full secondary build that I've got here, my range on the secondaries is 11.5 kilometers. That is the same as on the Freddy. And the armor scheme is almost identical. And again, I'll cover this in the second part of the review when I go to the port. Now, in this particular game, our team got a very early lead. We took down 3 ships very quickly. We've gotten the inner ring, and you can see Angry Ace is working on getting the center. And in these epicenter matches, if the rings in the center are not being consistently contested, the team that's not contesting is going to lose quite quickly. The points stack up pretty fast once these areas are controlled. Now you can see I've already switched to high explosive. I'm trying to aim for the superstructure or potentially the bow, as my secondaries have now set their third fire. Yeah, that was not a very satisfying salvo, but I am going to keep the HE up here because with the Kurfürst and such a strong angle to me, it's going to be hard to get consistent AP pens on her unless I am able to get them up over the turrets and into the superstructure. At least with the HE, I can pen her bow and get some pen damage that way, and obviously set fires as well. This time I'm going to fire on the Bismarck, who's sailing broadside. I kind of wish I had AP loaded there. I am switching to AP now because the Baltimore has come out. I'm going to switch my secondaries to her, but I think this Baltimore is going to figure out pretty quickly that he needs to get some distance and get out of my secondary range. So yeah, I am comfortable with the Friedrich. Although the gun systems obviously are quite different, the execution style in terms of how you manage the ship and the engagements are very similar between the two ships. And again, they are both very well armored, especially in close combat. They do take significant pen, like most German battleships, if they give too much side. And I will have a segment from the second match I played with her, and that's after this particular match, where I will highlight some angling that I did not provide, or adequate angling, and ended up taking a lot of pen damage, which ended up finishing me off more quickly than ideally it would have been nice. But here I'm angled okay against the core first. There my secondaries have set another fire. I'm up to over 100,000 in damage. A lot of that at this point is fires. And this poor Warfirst is just kind of being bled to death from my secondaries and the fires that they're setting. Now, the secondaries are also the same as on the Freddy. They have the 150 millimeter guns, which can penetrate up to 38 millimeters, and they have the 105 millimeter guns, which can penetrate up to 26 millimeters. Again, if you're comfortable with the secondary systems on the Freddy or even the Bismarck or Tirpitz, you'll be quite familiar with these. The ballistics on the main battery are also identical to what you have on the Bismarck and the Tirpitz and the Gneisenau. So again, if you're comfortable with those gun systems, you'll be comfortable with these as well. There again, I set another fire. And again, I continue to fire HE here because he just was providing way too much angling. I set 2 more fires. This poor, and there's Wither. This poor Corforest has just kind of been bled to death. He probably should have just gotten turned around rather than continuing to try to bow tank and back up. This is the entirety of the opposing fleet. I was initially not being focused by many, and now I'm coming under target by 4 or 5 at one time. There's another fire on the core first, and with the current points where they are, he goes down and we win the game. I get Arsonist and I kill him with my secondaries. So I get close quarters too. All right, so this is the other, or the second game I had with her. And again, I'm going to highlight here that how not to angle. The German battleships have a bad reputation. See, I take a big hit there from the Montana. The German battleships have a really bad reputation for taking a lot of pen damage. So while their turtlebacks prevent them from taking citadels at medium and close ranges quite reliably, they take a lot of penetrating damage, and that, even though it's more repairable, can wear them down quite quickly. They tend to take fewer overpens. Again, that one I was a little better angled and took a little less damage, and again, here I've switched from AP to HE because this kiting Montana is just providing too much angle for my AP to get some decent damage. I'm going to rotate here so I get my bow on the Montana and then put my focus on the Bismarck. And then here we'll see that when the Montana fires on me, since I have my bow on the Montana, I'll take a lot less damage. There's an example. I'm going to bounce a lot more shells with a much better angle against the Montana. Trying to swing my guns over here to help Angry Ace with this Erland over at Bravo. Yeah, shells out. I don't know if I hit there. Don't remember. But right now I'm focusing my secondaries on the Bismarck. The Bismarck looks like he's going to eat some torpedoes from our Shimakaze that's to my starboard side. And at this point, I'm overextended. There are several opponents that are up in the Charlie Cap area that I cannot see. Yeah, there goes the Bismarck. And so I'm basically in a crossfire between the Montana and those opponents, and I'm simply overextended. Here again, I'm overturning and giving too much side. And again, this is a challenge with the German battleships. Their rear firing angles on their guns tends to be quite poor. And so they tend to eat a lot more damage that way. And I've got to angle back in here if I expect to survive anymore. But again, with being in this crossfire with, I think that's an Amalfi that's firing on me as well. And there was at least one other battleship. It's becoming increasingly difficult to survive. I'm down to 11,000 hit points. Now less than that. Take some more damage. Now you'll also notice here that my main battery has been knocked out quite a few times. I am using the main armaments modification 1 upgrade in slot 1. I found that my turrets were getting knocked out more frequently than I expected. And I don't know if I was just having some bad luck in this particular game or what. But in any case, I'm going to go down here and we'll go over to port. Okay, here we are with the Pommern in the Hamburg port that's been updated for 097. I really like what Wargaming has done to the port for this update with the twilight backdrop and the lights in the city. The lights on the tugboats illuminating the ships is quite picturesque. So, as I do for other reviews, I will do a walkthrough of the Pommern specifications. I will do quite a few comparisons with the Friedrich der Große on which the Pommern is based. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities, but there's also some key differences. I'll do a walkthrough of my upgrade choices and my commander skills, and then I'll touch on signals. So starting with her armor, the Pommern has largely the same armor as on the Freddy other than her turrets. She is going to be a well-armored battleship. She has 32mm bow and stern. She has a 60mm icebreaker, which basically is going to make her immune to Citadel hits when she is bow on, even by the biggest guns in the game. She has a 150mm cheek plate here, which I'll touch on a little bit more later. And her aft, she has a 90mm plate in the back here that doesn't go all the way to the stern, but it should allow the Pommern to be a very good kiting battleship, especially when sort of defending or slowing a stronger opposing flank. The Freddy can be very good at this as well. She has very good stern armor, so she should be able to tolerate, or sort of be very survivable in a kiting posture. Her deck is very good, 32mm right on the ends, but then it comes up to 50mm in the fore, aft, and the center areas of the deck, and then it's 80mm over the casemates and the turrets. So her deck is quite immune to most HE penetration, so that's very good. Her superstructure is 19mm. That's standard for battleships at this tier. Her turrets are pretty well armored. They have a 400mm frontal plate. So I have found, or I think, at least on paper, that she should be pretty survivable as far as her turrets. But I have found that my turrets have gotten knocked out more frequently than I expected in the couple of games that I have played. Maybe I just had some bad luck. I'll have to see how that goes. And that will also factor into choices around upgrade. Now, as is the case with other German battleships, she has a particular belt arrangement that is both good and bad. So the good aspect of it is that if she is well angled, everything's going to bounce. That hits her belt. That comes in and strikes her belt when she's well angled. However, if she's giving a lot of side, a lot of AP, even heavy cruiser AP, especially with this upper belt that's 145mm, is going to get through, and she's going to take a lot of penetrating damage. She will avoid Citadel hits at medium and close range, but she is going to be, like many other German battleships, she's going to be very vulnerable to penetrating damage, and we saw good examples of that in the second part of the replay from a few minutes ago. Her main belt graduates up to 235mm and then 300mm here, so that's reasonably good. As is the case for pretty much all German battleships other than the Prinz Eitel Friedrich, she does have a turtleback, and this is the same turtleback, these sloped decks on either side of the Citadel. This is the same turtleback as on the Freddy, and so that's going to make her largely immune to Citadel hits in close and medium range combat. She will be potentially vulnerable to Citadel hits through plunging fire that bypass the turtleback and come in through the deck down into the Citadel, but that again, that's not too common. Now, one thing that experienced battleship players do when they're facing against German battleships is they look to try to get through this cheek area, and it requires some practice and some RNG. But if the ship is angled poorly enough to be able to get through that cheek and then have shells enter the Citadel through the forward athwart ship, it is reasonably reliable to Citadel a German battleship at close range. And like I said, skilled battleship players, when they're facing off against German battleships, will look to try to exploit that weakness. Again, it does require some practice, and I'll leave a link to a video from Arun that goes into this on how to Citadel a German battleship in those close combat situations. But otherwise, this is going to be a very durable ship in close combat. Getting to her survivability, she has 81,900 hit points. This is 2,400 fewer hit points than on the Freddy. Her torpedo protection is, as the case with other German battleships, really pretty mediocre at 25%. That's also the same as on the Freddy. Her guns obviously are where things get different, or at least her main battery. So the Freddy carries 8 rifles, either 406 or 420 millimeters, depending on what you have mounted. The Pommern gets 12 380 millimeter guns. These are the same rifles as on the Bismarck, the Tirpitz, and the Gneisenau. So if you're familiar with those gun systems, you will be quite comfortable with these. The Sigma is worse on the Pommern than on the other ships I just mentioned. In fact, her Sigma was nerfed to 1.5 right before she was released. This means that you're going to see her shells dispersed more evenly, and there'll be less tight groupings than you see on ships with a higher Sigma. So it's going to be a little more shotgunny than other German battleships, but with 12 rifles, and I think this is part of what Wargaming was getting at, was that with 12 rifles, you don't want super high accuracy. You want to have some balance there. But I haven't found it to be too much of an issue so far. I found that my shots have been reasonably accurate so long as I aim well. The base reload is 33 seconds. This is 1 second fewer or longer, I should say, than on the Alsace. So it's materially the same as on other 380 millimeter Tier 9 battleships with 12 guns. It's 29 seconds here because I have the main battery modification 3 upgrade in slot 6, which I'll touch on here shortly when I get to upgrades. The base turret rotation is 36 seconds, which is quite good. It's 35.6 here because of the main battery modification 3, which worsens turret rotation, and then that's recovered by the expert marksman skill, which again I'll get to when I review the commander skills. Dispersion is 273 meters at her maximum range of 21.3 kilometers, which is decent range and typical dispersion. You could tighten this up by 7%. By taking the aiming systems modification upgrade in slot 3, which I don't have. But if you wanted tighter dispersion, you could do it that way. The alpha on the AP and HE shells are identical to the Bismarck. It's 11,600 for the AP. It's 4,400 for the HE. The fire chance is actually quite good at 34%. And because she gets the 1/4 penetration on the HE, they will penetrate up to 95 millimeters, which is going to be able to get through a lot of surfaces, even on the most well-armored battleships in the game. And you will find, at least I have found, that I've fired HE more frequently than I might have otherwise, especially when dealing with protracted engagements with well-armored battleships like we saw against the Große Kurfürst in the first part of the replay. Ballistics are identical to what you are on the Bismarck. These are pretty flat firing, 820 meters per second, and the ballistics are the same for both HE and AP, so you don't have to relearn those. The secondaries on the Pommern are identical to on the Freddy. So 2 calibers, 150 millimeters and 105 millimeters. The 150s will penetrate up to 38 millimeters. The 105s will penetrate up to 26. This is more than enough for all superstructures, most destroyer surfaces, quite a few cruisers, even upper tier cruisers. You could bump the 105 millimeter penetration, or the 105s, get their penetration up to 32 millimeters with IFHE. It's a lot of investment for some pretty high specialization, so that's a consideration. I don't happen to run it on this ship. I think that especially if she ends up facing like tier 7 battleships, the 26 millimeters is enough to get through the bows and sterns of those ships as well. So I think this is a pretty competent level of penetration. All right. And then I mentioned here that her main battery range is 21.3 kilometers. All right. Getting to a key difference, or another key difference compared to the Freddy, she has torpedoes. So these are identical to on the Tirpitz, the the Odin, the Siegfried, the Aegir. These are 4 torpedoes on each side of the ship in a single launcher, 90-second reload. They go 64 knots. They have a 6-kilometer range. The alpha is pretty low at 13,700. These are great to have in those close combat situations. The concealment or detection on them is quite good, but by the time you're close enough to torpedo them, they know your opponents know that you're sending torpedoes. So having a good concealment on your torpedoes really isn't too much of an issue. Okay, AA is frankly pretty bad for a Tier 9 battleship. So I tend to ignore this number, the 78. What I look for more are 2 things. First is the continuous damage. At 307 hit points per second is not very good for a Tier 9 battleship. And the range is quite poor. This is typical of other German battleships, 5.2 kilometers. This is also in contrast to the Odin, Aegir, and Siegfried, which when they were introduced got a AA range of 6 kilometers. So the AA on the Pommern really isn't that strong. She will probably do okay against Tier 8 planes, but do quite poorly against Tier 10, I expect. I haven't had enough games against carriers to really draw a good conclusion here, but based on what I see here, the AA just really isn't that good. Maneuverability, she's a big ship. Her speed is actually quite good. Her base speed is 31 knots. So with a Sierra mic signal like I've got mounted here, it's 32.6. Her turning circle is big at 940 meters. That's not the worst in the game, but that's still big. And then her rudder is 17.3 seconds, which is not very responsive, but she's okay. Again, this is a big lumbering battleship. Her concealment also is obviously not going to be very good. The 15.1 kilometer detection here includes the camouflage and the concealment system upgrade in slot 5. It does not include the concealment expert skill. If you were to add concealment expert, you could bring it down to about 13.5 kilometers, which is not bad for a ship of this size. So those are her specs. Getting to her upgrades. So I spec'd into a blended secondary survivability build. This is something that I've done for a long time, and I talked about at length in my secondary build video from last year, which you can go check out, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description below if you haven't seen that. The build I went with on the upgrades, main armaments, modification 1. I think it's most important to protect the main battery. I know quite a few secondary build fans are likely to go with the auxiliary armaments a modification 1 upgrade instead to improve the survivability of their secondary battery guns. This also improves the survivability of AA mounts. It basically doubles the number of hit points that these components have, or these modules have. But to me, with very few exceptions, like 1 game in 100, the vast majority of your games, your main battery delivers most of the damage in a game, and it's most important to protect the main battery, so I almost always take this. For slot 2, I took the damage control system modification 1 upgrade to reduce the chance of flood and fire. You could mount the hydroacoustic search special upgrade here to extend the action time of the hydro by 20%. I think it's more important for a battleship to be as survivable as possible, but that's another choice you could make. Slot 3 is where you're going to have to make a consideration. So if you go for a secondary build, you're going to go with the secondary battery modification 1 upgrade like I have here. If you elected to go with a tank concealment build, you could go with either aiming systems or the main battery modification 2 to improve the turret rotation. So some things to consider. You could technically take the Torpedo 2's modification to improve the speed of the torpedoes, but I personally don't think that would be a suitable choice. Slot 4, I went with the damage control system modification 2 to reduce the duration of floods and fires. You could take the steering gears. That would reduce the steering, the rudder shift time by 20%, so bring it down to about 14 seconds, which is not bad for a ship of this size. But again, I wanted to have maximum survivability where possible, so I took the damage control system upgrade. For slot 5, again, another consideration point. I went with Concealment. I want to be able to drop into Concealment if I need to and sort of stay away if I need to get some health back before re-engaging, and having the Concealment system upgrade gives you better flexibility there. I do know quite a few players that like taking the Ship Consumable Modification 1 upgrade instead now to increase the action time of ship consumables, so that's another choice to consider. In slot 6, this is going to be a major consideration point. I went with the main battery modification 3 upgrade to improve or reduce the reload from 33 to 29 seconds. You could take the auxiliary armaments modification 2 to improve the reload or reduce the reload on secondary battery guns. This also improves AA, so that's another consideration. I suppose you could take the gunfire control system modification 2 to increase the range by 16%, but since the shells are already pretty shotgunny, even at the range of 21.3 kilometers, I'm not sure that this would be a good choice. Okay, so those are the upgrades. As far as consumables, she gets 3. She gets the damage control and repair party that's ubiquitous on battleships. She gets the hydroacoustic search. This is the superior German hydro, and she does not get a spotter plane, which is the one consumable I'd kind of like to see her have. There is the place on the ship to have the plane in the same position that it exists on the Freddy, but Wargaming has elected to not have a plane for this ship. I like having the spotter to get a better viewing angle on targets that are on the other side of terrain. It's not so much for the range, it's more just for the visibility and better aiming. Just a reminder here in 097, we can reorder the position of consumables in their different slots. When I got the Pommern, the hydroacoustic search was in slot 3. To make it consistent with hydroacoustic search on other German battleships, I moved it to the 4th slot so that I have a consistent experience. And just a reminder, you can do this for all ships now to rearrange their consumable positions. All right, so those are the upgrades and consumables. Getting to the commander skills. This is the commander from my Bismarck. I went with a secondary or blended secondary survivability build. That means I take the AFT and manual fire control for secondary armament skills for the secondaries, and then for the survivability, I take superintendent for an extra heal and the basics of survivability to reduce the duration of floods and fires. I do take the expert marksman to offset the penalty of the turret rotation from the main battery modification 3, and then adrenaline rush is pretty ubiquitous, or should be ubiquitous, on every surface combat ship in the game. And then I like priority target because it tells me not only am I about to get focused, but it also gives me some indication when a suspected or known destroyer is sending torpedoes on me based on seeing the priority target number change. A lot of players prefer to go with preventative maintenance. That would certainly be a suitable option as well, especially since, like I said, I saw my turrets getting knocked out more often than I would like, and this would help prevent that. So this is my current build. If I were to go with a full tank concealment build, I would drop the manual secondaries and AFT, pick up fire prevention and concealment instead, and keep the rest mostly the same. You could drop expert marksman and pick up jack of all trades or high alert to reduce the cooldown on consumables, and therefore be able to get your damage control and your repair party consumables back online sooner. That would be an option as well. But like I said, I've elected to go with this blended build. Okay, getting to signals very quickly. So standard set of 6 signals across the mid here. November Foxtrot to reduce the cooldown on consumables. Sierra Mike to improve my ship speed. India Delta to improve the rate of recovery of health when I use the repair party. Juliet Yankee Buddhist 2 for reduced flooding time. India Yankee to reduce fire duration. And then the ubiquitous Juliet Charlie signal to prevent detonation. And then because I have a secondary build, I have the Mike Yankee 6 combat signal to increase the range and reduce the dispersion and improve the reload time on the secondary guns. So those were the signals. So the Pommern, let me give some final thoughts here. So far I've liked the ship a lot. I'm very comfortable with the gun systems. I'm familiar with playing the Freddy. I think she has a very good complement of sort of a mixture of capabilities across a number of upper tier German battleships. If you are comfortable with German battleships, I think you would find the Pommern a very good fit. And a lot of fun to play. And like I said, the only thing that I kind of wish she had was a spotter. And her guns are going to be kind of shotgunny, and that's going to be something that you're just going to have to work with if you're going to play her. Is she worth spending $80 for? I don't know. I guess that depends upon your personal situation. But is she worth the 228,000 coal? I do think so. And in fact, I picked her up for 177,000 coal because I had the coal coupon to apply. So I think she is going to be a fun ship to play. I think she will probably be much more popular than the Freddy because the Freddy has a pretty unpleasant reputation because she has relatively few guns, and that often makes her a very frustrating experience for a lot of players. And I think the Pommern will probably be a more comfortable choice for a lot of players. So that's going to wrap up my initial impressions and review of this brand new premium Tier 9 German battleship. I hope everybody enjoyed the review and the commentary. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'm happy to answer them or try to get us to a resource that can. And with that, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.